One of Kevin Costner's first roles came in the most terrifying nuclear war movie ever made. These days, Kevin Costner is recognized as a notable film and television star, yet some of his earliest roles have mostly been forgotten, including his part in the 1983 apocalypse movie, Testament. Costner's career began in the early 1980s, but the actor didn't really take off until 1987. When he took on the role of Elliot Ness in The Untouchables. He continued starring in big-name movies, and soon enough directed his first feature film, Dances with Wolves, which became a blockbuster. Since then, Costner has continued making and leading westerns, action films, and dramas. Today, Costner's name on a cast list could be enough to lure certain audiences into watching a project. For example, Taylor Sheridan's Yellowstone definitely benefited from having such an important Western actor in its ranks in 2018, leading to 5 successful seasons. Similarly, his exit definitely caused issues for the series as well. However, back in the 1980s, Costner hadn't yet made a name for himself, and movies like Testament show the actor proving himself, not only to the filmmakers and the audience. Costner's 7th ever movie role was in the 1983 film Testament. The movie, based on a short story called The Last Testament by Carol Lamon, is about a small California suburb that is thrown into chaos when a nuclear disaster hits and slowly demolishes society. It centers on the Westerly family in particular and their struggle for normalcy. In the film, Costner plays Phil Pitkin, a local neighborhood man who spends time with the Westerlys right after the attack. Testament and Costner's role in it have definitely been forgotten as time has gone on, but both deserve to be re-examined in the modern day. Though Costner doesn't play an especially big role, his performance in Testament is a reminder that he was once a young actor just starting out, looking for his niche. Furthermore, Testament should get a resurgence in popularity because of its gripping story, which has a certified fresh 89% on Rotten Tomatoes. Another reason for reviving Testament is that it is still prevalent. Although fears of nuclear war aren't quite as strong today as they were in the 1980s, the possibility of an apocalypse is still fresh in audiences' minds. Dystopia has long been a genre where viewers find comfort and also realism. In this way, Testament could be a great watch for those who are craving this kind of dark and thrilling story that imagines what our worst fears would actually look like. One great way to bring Testament back into the public consciousness is by developing a remake. Hollywood is currently in a long-running phase of funding sequels, spin-offs, and remakes, and Testament could be a worthy subject. Its themes are completely relevant in the modern day, and current social issues could make the film even more effective. Perhaps Costner could even return as a new character. All in all, Testament should be back on viewers' radars. Before he was a household name, before he was Dances with Wolves, and long before he roamed the windswept plains of Yellowstone, Kevin Costner was a ghost in a nightmare. Not the kind that haunts your bedroom closet, but one that lives in your television set, whispering about what the end of the world might look like if we let it happen. In 1983, America huddled around their TVs with hands over their mouths in fear, prickling the backs of their necks. ABC aired the day after a 2-hour made-for-TV film that didn't pull its punches. It was a dramatization of a nuclear attack on the United States, set in the heart of Kansas. Mushroom clouds, mass panic, radiation sickness, and unflinching despair filled the screen. And for a young Kevin Costner, appearing in one of his earliest film roles, it was a haunting beginning. His character didn't speak much. In fact, most viewers barely noticed him at first. Costner played a soldier, clean-cut, stoic, briefly heroic. His screen time was limited, but his presence echoed. He wasn't the lead, but he was part of the truth the movie tried to tell. In nuclear war, everyone is expendable, even the people we think are destined for greatness. Back then, nobody knew his name. In 1983, Kevin Costner had the face of a man who could do anything: lawman, cowboy, baseball player. But he didn't yet have the name to match. He had done a few small projects, bit parts, commercials. But The Day After was different. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even cinematic in the usual sense. It was raw, urgent, and chilling. The film was watched by over 100 million people the night it aired. That meant Costner's face, brief as it appeared, was burned into the American psyche along with the ash-covered landscapes of nuclear aftermath. At the time, President Ronald Reagan watched it in the White House. According to reports, it deeply disturbed him, possibly even influencing his later stance on nuclear arms reduction. Think about that. A movie with a modest budget and a young, barely known actor might have shifted global policy. Kevin Costner wouldn't be remembered for the movie, but the movie remembers him. The scene that stuck. There's one moment, if you watch closely, where Costner's character is handing out supplies to civilians just before the sirens begin to wail. He's calm, too calm. He tells a woman to keep moving, and then glances at the sky, as if he knows what's coming. A flash, a silence, and then the world begins to end. The film cuts rapidly between chaos and confusion. People screaming, power lines falling, shadows burned into brick walls. Somewhere in the swirl, Costner's figure vanishes behind a wall of dust and fire. No death scene, no glory. Just gone. That was the whole point. The Day After wasn't about heroes. It wasn't about surviving. It was about showing the cost. It's ironic that Costner, who would go on to become one of Hollywood's leading men, was introduced to many viewers not as a survivor, but as a casualty. Art imitates fear. To understand The Day After is to understand the early 1980s. A world on edge. The Cold War wasn't just history, it was a ticking clock. Families built fallout shelters. Kids did duck and cover drills. Politicians gave speeches filled with euphemisms like mutual assured destruction, as if saying it in Latin would make it less terrifying. In that environment, the movie landed like a meteor. And somewhere in the embers of that broadcast, a young Kevin Costner stood, already proving that he could carry the weight of a broken world, even if only for a minute. What it meant later. Costner would go on to play plenty of saviors. In The Postman, he wandered a post-apocalyptic America with letters and hope. In Waterworld, he swam through the wreckage of an oceanic future. And in Man of Steel, he would play Jonathan Kent, the moral compass for Superman, guiding a god in a dangerous world. But The Day After was different. It wasn't science fiction. It wasn't fantasy. It was a mirror. One we were all too afraid to look into until ABC forced us to sit down and stare. For Costner, it was a step into that mirror. And though his part was small, his journey as an actor was forged in the fire of that broadcast. He didn't play a man with all the answers. He played a man caught in the gears of war. A background character in the worst-case scenario. It was perhaps the most honest role he's ever had. Echoes in pop culture. Today, we scroll past headlines about nuclear tensions without blinking. We binge shows about dystopias while snacking on popcorn. But in 1983, people didn't sleep after The Day After. They wrote letters. They argued at dinner tables. They begged their leaders to do better. And Kevin Costner, he moved on to bigger roles. He chased dreams across cornfields in Field of Dreams. He stared down injustice in JFK. He battled with wolves and danced with destiny. But that quiet, terrified soldier in the day after, he's still there. In the shadows of every mushroom cloud in Costner's later work, in the sullen silences between lines, in the knowing glances at the horizon. Conclusion: a legacy in ashes. It's rare for an actor's earliest role to carry so much weight. Costner's part in the day after didn't launch his career in a traditional sense, but it shaped him. It was a glimpse into the kind of stories he'd eventually tell, stories about survival, sacrifice, and the crumbling edges of civilization. So while the world remembers Kevin Costner for his iconic roles, those who watched in 1983 may remember something else. A soldier on the edge of apocalypse, standing in the flickering light of the most terrifying nuclear war movie ever made. And maybe, just maybe, helping to change the course of history by doing so.